On national television, Judge Greg Mathis spent 40 years cultivating the ideal family image. However, his wife Linda filed for divorce in August 2024, and at last, the truth was revealed. Even his closest friends were stunned by the charges, which included tales of affairs with women half his age and whispers about a secret child. What actually transpired during the 3 weeks after her filing of those documents? And why did a man who had spoken about morality for decades suddenly find himself embroiled in his own scandal? The true story is more complex than anyone could have imagined. On April 5, 1960, Greg Mathis was born in Detroit's massive public housing complex, Hermann Gardens. The 160-acre facility was constructed in 1942 to accommodate 250 families. It was once thought of as a proud response to the demand for dwellings for war workers. Those brick houses had begun to feel different by the time Greg was old enough to recall anything. The paint peeled. I've always felt uneasy. His mother was the only one keeping everything together. After their father left, raising 4 boys, she worked tirelessly, but the projects surrounding them were collapsing, and the money never kept up with the burden of the expenses. When the late 1960s rolled around, Hermann Gardens began to feel more like a trap than a promise. Substances entered. Fear did the same. One night of when Greg was around 12 years old etched itself indelibly in his mind. A man who was high on heroin broke into their flat and attempted to harm his mother. In a few horrifying moments, the youngsters witnessed the destruction of their secure haven. After grabbing what they could and leaving the house, they ended up in even more dangerous housing, where sirens and gunshots were commonplace sounds. His mom worked 2 jobs, occasionally more. However, the boys continued to experience nights of starvation and days when they felt as though they were growing up in the midst of a conflict that nobody outside the neighborhood wanted to witness. Greg was deeply affected by the dread, humiliation, and hopeless rage that started to mold him into the person he would become. His early years coincided with the homecoming of Vietnam soldiers to Detroit, even before he could articulate it. Many returned with an addiction, particularly to heroin, which they carried to the projects. Hermann Gardens began to deteriorate into one of the city's most dangerous areas within 2 years of Greg's birth. Drug traffickers, frequently ex-soldiers, were operating on the streets and openly selling heroin by the early 1970s. The trust that had previously bound neighbors together started to erode. People locked their windows and shut their doors. With children sneaking in, guns and gangs claiming areas of the playground as their own, the schools became tense battlegrounds. Greg did not remain on the sidelines. He started doing little crimes with other youths from the projects when he was about 10 years old. They pilfered groceries. In order to obtain anything they could, they broke into places. It began as a matter of survival. It quickly turned into a habit. There was violence everywhere. Greg was shot during a heist when he was 13 years old. That ought to have served as a warning to a child. In his world, it was more evidence that he was a real street person. At the time, he thought of it as gaining stripes. By 15, there were a growing number of arrests for breaking and entering, stealing purses, and stealing. Trouble turned into an almost routine cycle. The turmoil was too much for the school to handle. At first, he went to Hermann Gardens Elementary and tried to concentrate while shouting and fighting resounded throughout the building. In order to protect him from the worst of the conflict, he was later sent to Peterson's Seventh-day Adventist school. However, the streets had a powerful attraction. The projects remained at home. He was exhausted by the pressure and the arrests by the time he arrived at Wayne Memorial High School. He left school at the age of 15 and was shortly serving time in juvenile detention. Something changed when he was still on probation in 1977. Operation Push, a program designed for young people like him, who everyone else had all but written off, helped him achieve his GED. That opportunity didn't just happen. His mother appeared in court and informed the judge that she had colon cancer. She informed them that her time was limited. The judge gave Greg a direct look and informed him that he had 2 choices. He could either earn his GED and try to create something else, or he could sit in a cell. He felt the weight of that moment on his chest. More than any rival gang, the prospect of losing his mother while still trapped, as the same boy from the block, started to frighten him. Greg had already committed to a different kind of gang, long before he wore a robe. He joined the infamous Detroit gang Errol Flynn at the age of 12. Which eventually served as a template for numerous other gangs operating in the city in the 1970s and 1980s. He started off as a young child at odd jobs. He and his pals made extra cash in the projects by stealing steaks from stores and selling them. They chuckled over it. At 05:50, they assured themselves that they were hustlers rather than victims. However, everything happened fast. These little jobs developed into armed robberies, pocketbook snatching, and major break-ins. The people they chose to target added to the intensity of their story. They didn't just break into residences at random. They looked at police officer residences. After observing schedules and determining when those police would be absent, they broke in to grab firearms. Greg later acknowledged that they were aware that police officers would keep extra guns in their residences. Money wasn't the only reason for stealing those firearms. It has to do with perception. There was a perverse sense of prestige associated with carrying a firearm that had once belonged to a police officer. It stated that you had the audacity to overthrow those who were meant to be in charge of you. Greg had switched from stealing stuff to selling poison by the time he was 15. In the midst of the heroin epidemic of the 1970s, he joined the daily heroin trade in the projects. In interviews, he has acknowledged that this was not a side gig. He was managing a real operation inside the housing project on a daily basis. The money received was used for more than just entertainment or clothing. He refilled the weapons with it. In order to protect their reputation and their corners, he and his gang increased their weaponry. Shootouts were frequent, as gangs fought over territorial borders and drug locations that no one outside the neighborhood ever saw on a map. Hearing gunfire nearly every day became the norm. Greg stated that he started carrying a gun every day at the age of 12 and that he shot frequently. These weren't airborne warning shots, real bullets colliding with real bodies, walls, and windows in the dark. These were real encounters. By the age of 17, the consequences of his decisions were evidently recorded in court documents. As a minor, he had been arrested over 20 times for drug dealing, weapons possession, and burglary. Wayne County's juvenile prison facilities were like a second home to him because he was in and out of them so frequently. With music, releasing nights of pledges to do better, and swift falls back into the same streets, life turned into a circle of concrete walls. When he attempted to enter the legal field, the paper trail from those years would resurface. However, he was not considering courts or legal licensing at the time. All he wanted was to survive and stay ahead. Everything eventually came together at the age of 17. He was apprehended with a concealed firearm in Detroit. He was no longer treated like a child by the system this time. Prosecutors charged him as an adult due to his lengthy past. Rather than being transported to a juvenile center, he was sentenced to 9 months in Wayne County Jail, a genuine adult jail. The atmosphere within was distinct. The stakes were higher. While he was incarcerated for youthful offenses, his mother had refused to see him for years. She arrived now. She entered the visiting area, glanced at her son seated behind the glass, and revealed the truth. She informed him that he had made her feel ashamed at the church, the neighborhood, and the schools. She informed him that he was the subject of whispers and that his name was always associated with dishonor. Then she revealed something far worse to him. She had colon cancer. She was running out of time. Later, Greg referred to that moment as the catalyst. It was more devastating than any bullet to hear that his mother would pass away, while he was still that same youngster, still incarcerated. The strong persona he had developed on the streets was pierced by the fear of losing her as much as her anguish and disappointment. Following that meeting, the judge offered him a decision that would drastically change his course in life. He had to get his GED and consent to probation if he wanted to leave early, avoid serving the whole 9 months, and avoid future adult time. No freedom, no school. Greg agreed. As a result of that ruling, he was freed after roughly 3 months, rather than completing the entire sentence. As soon as he was outside, he enrolled in a program, similar to Operation Push, to complete his GED while still on probation. He didn't stop when he passed. He enrolled at Eastern Michigan University, approximately 6 months later, at the age of 18. The same young person who had been stealing guns and selling drugs was suddenly learning about activism and public administration in college classes. He started to change from being a gang member to someone who could testify in court. When people refer to him as a symbol of redemption, they now consider that metamorphosis. In the early 1980s, he continued to climb. Greg was grinding in silence while many still just remembered him as a past troublemaker. He attended the University of Detroit Mercy School of Law at night, from 1983 to 1987. He worked throughout the day. He studied at night. On May 17, 1987, he was awarded his doctorate in law. However, he was not readily let go by the past. Between 1987 and 1988, the Michigan Bar rejected his 3 applications for a law license. The figures appeared harsh on paper. At that time, the overall bar passage rate was roughly 72%. It was approximately 5% for those with felonies. 12 arrests connected to drug use and gang fighting were on Greg's record. In accordance with the ethics norms of Rule 7, he appeared to be a poor choice because of his past. Rejection letters dated March 5, 1987, and June 12, 1987, were sent to him. Each of them informed him that his history held greater influence than his attempts to alter it. He was still the child the system remembered after all the effort and learning, not the man he was attempting to become. He had the option to leave. Rather, he used all that suffering as fuel. He pushed his battle all the way to the Michigan Supreme Court on September 15, 1988. He didn't come with nothing. He carried a self-prepared petition. He took 5,000 signatures from supporters of his cause with him. In addition, he provided support from public figures such as Clyde Cleveland and affidavits from 200 young people he had mentored. He wanted the whole image to be shown to the justices, not just the youngster with the pistol, the man who returned to the neighborhood and attempted to fix what he had previously assisted in breaking. Mathis was prepared to enter politics by 1989. He campaigned for Detroit City Council at the age of 29, bringing a unique story with him. He had been a prisoner, a gang member, and now he was an activist promising change to the city. He ran on a platform of opportunity, justice, and police reform. The public paid attention to his heart, but the media probed his background. Even though he lost that election, his influence was indisputable. The movement gave young activists, who had previously thought their opinions didn't matter, a platform, and compelled the city to address police abuse. His national influence was built on that setback, which also earned him a permanent seat on the NAACP board. A small dispute turned into a movement. He made another audacious move in 1990. In order to interrupt the cycle of incarceration and rearrest that ensnared so many young men, he established the Youth Empowerment Program. More than 200 former members of Errol Flynn's gang were personally bailed out by him, offering them a second chance that most people would never have. He changed those lives with discipline, training, and mentoring. It was evident from the data. Participants had a 50% lower chance of unemployment and a 40% higher chance of graduating. It developed into one of the nation's most successful youth rehabilitation initiatives. Mathis demonstrated that you can overcome any obstacle if someone has faith in you during your worst moments. That conviction paid off once more in 1995, 5 years later. After failing the bar exam 3 times, Mathis finally passed it at the age of 35. Despite his criminal record, which at one point appeared insurmountable, he persisted. He was named interim judge of Michigan's 36th District Court that same year by Mayor Dennis Archer. Behind the bench sat the boy who had been in a jail cell. He was a symbol of salvation that extended well beyond Detroit, becoming the youngest judge in Michigan history. His firm, just, and compassionate courtroom was a reflection of his path. Every decision served as a reminder that a city may be rebuilt with second chances. Mathis campaigned for office that year and received 78% of the vote, winning by a wide margin. The catchphrase was straightforward but impactful: second chances. Everyone who had ever been undervalued could relate to that. In communities that didn't trust the system, his experience as a former prisoner gave him credibility. His journey from prisoner at the age of 17 to judge at the age of 35 garnered national attention. He successfully appealed to the Michigan Supreme Court after his legal license was previously refused. His honors went beyond mere recognition. They were meant to have an impact and serve as a reminder to millions of viewers that second chances were real. His presentation, which was recorded in front of live audiences, gained notoriety for its intense passion and poignant moments. He made little disputes into moral teachings, reprimanded indolent defendants, and penalized deadbeat fathers. His incisive humor and emotional candor infused the audience, resulting in moments that frequently went viral. People felt him, not just observed him. The underlying theme of each episode was that shaped his life. Redemption is real, regardless of where you begin. Shortly after losing his mother, Judge Greg Mathis married Linda Ree on June 1985 after meeting her at Eastern Michigan University. Together, they created a family that would quickly rank among the most well-known on TV. Their 4 children: Jade, born in May 1985, Camara, born in October 1987, Greg Jr., born in January 1989, and Amir, born in July 1990, were raised in a loving and disciplined environment in Detroit. While Greg navigated the legal system, Linda took care of the house and money. He also became Michigan's youngest elected judge in 1995, at the age of just 35. His achievements went beyond his career. It was based on faith, sacrifice, and the power of the family. When Greg was awarded a star on the Walk of Fame in May 2022, transforming a Detroit youngster into a representation of tenacity, that same connection carried them into Hollywood decades later. When Greg Jr. came out as gay during the June 2022 premiere of Mathis' Family Matters, their unity was put to the ultimate test. Even his father was taken by surprise when the revelation was broadcast live on national television. Greg Jr. had been afraid of the world's condemnation and the potential damage to his father's image. Thus, for years, he had kept his truth to himself. However, everything changed that night. Judge Mathis said that he was offended that his son had felt uncomfortable sharing such a significant aspect of himself through music. But in a matter of seconds, he was standing solidly next to him. It was captured on camera. The affection, the sobs, and the vow that no one would hurt his son without first confronting him. The show garnered a lot of attention, increasing ratings by over 30%, and transforming their private moment into a national discussion on acceptance in Black households. Mathis' Family Matters, which aired in June 2022 and provided access to the family's private affairs, had already brought attention to their voyage. It featured therapy sessions, arguments over real estate, familial conflict, and heartwarming moments of laughing that made viewers realize how human they are. The transparency paid off. Through collaborations, real estate endeavors, and sponsorships, the Mathis brand expanded into a $20 million empire by 2023. Greg Jr., a political science graduate of the University of Michigan with a degree in music, leveraged his experience in politics in Washington, D.C., to grow their business. While Greg filmed up to 260 courtroom episodes annually, Linda oversaw the finances, managing contracts and assets. The honesty of it all, the way this family showed the world both their weaknesses and their strength, drew viewers in more than just the glamour. But Linda Mathis continued to be the constant power behind all of the accomplishments. Long before she became famous on television, she had established her own foundation, establishing 5 preschools that provided services to thousands of kids. The family's fortune and Greg's $20 million net worth were influenced by her discreet business acumen. When celebrities started to pull at them, she arranged appearances, struck bargains, and maintained harmony. Greg and their kids still gave her credit for creating the steadiness that kept them rooted for decades. Even after she filed for divorce in August 2024, she was more than his spouse. She served as his counterbalance, the one who brought order to chaos through. Greg officiated his son Greg Jr.'s marriage to Elliot Cooper on a beach in Cabo San Lucas on October 21, 2024. Both dads, Sergeant Calvin Cooper and Judge Mathis, led the ceremony, and the sound of laughter was carried by the ocean wind. Greg Jr. and Elliot first met in 2016, and their first romantic trip went to Cabo, which was a significant spot for them. It seemed like a complete circle moment during the wedding. The family had struggled with miscommunication and criticism for years, and now, in front of everyone, Greg was blessing his son's union. It was referred to as healing by friends. The pair talked candidly about beginning a family and pledged a larger ceremony in Los Angeles. For the Mathis family, it was a time of utter tranquility. However, not every moment was filled with joy. When a valet accused Greg of spitting on him outside of Flood's Bar and Grill in Detroit on August 23, 2019, Greg was the subject of public debate. The controversy, which started with misplaced Rolls-Royce keys, became national headlines in the end. Greg denied spitting, although he did acknowledge yelling. Police looked for proof, but the case was dropped after the accuser vanished. A city employee called Ricardo Aosta alleged that Greg Music had threatened him with a rifle after his truck blocked the judge's driveway in July 2023, sparking yet another storm. According to Aosta's report, Mathis went into his house, came back with a gun, and said, "I'll bust a cap." Although the LAPD did not find any concrete evidence and no charges were brought, the headlines stuck. Greg's attorney dismissed the allegations as untrue and described them as yet another attempt to damage his reputation. Then 2024, the year of whispers and feuds, arrived. Greg and rapper 50 Cent got into a public argument about a movie called The First Lady of BMF, the Tonza Welch story. In an Instagram video, Greg, the film's executive producer, urged 50 Cent to back the production rather than criticize it. "You, my guy," said Greg. "Let Tanza eat." Fans witnessed two Detroit luminaries fighting over pride and art as the internet erupted with comments. At about the same time, tabloids started spreading the side baby scandal, which claimed Greg was the father of a secret child. Soon after, Linda filed for divorce, claiming she had been emotionally neglected for years. Greg acknowledged that he had lost focus on his wife, but he disputed the existence of the child. The tale was widely reported by the media. However, there was never any proof that the rumor was accurate. One rumor caused more pain than the others during the commotion: the assertion that a 9/11 shooting event caused his show to terminate. Stories of canceled contracts and police calls became viral on social media. However, none of it was accurate. Warner Brothers' decision to leave the daytime court program market was the sole reason the Judge Mathis series stopped after 24 seasons. On May 25, 2023, the last episode aired, signaling the end of an era rather than a scandal. Allen Media Group, led by Byron Allen, made a bid a few weeks later in February 2023. Greg signed nearly right away, guaranteeing his comeback to television with Judge Mathis's Mathis Court, which debuted on September 11, 2023. His son Amir joined him as bailiff, this time making the performance a family affair. It was a new chapter, one based on atonement and legacy. His audience never left, as evidenced by the series' average weekly viewership of 2 million by 2025. Fans persisted despite the reappearance of previous accusations. They desired his voice, his passion, and his sense of justice, which consistently blended Detroit street knowledge with courtroom power. Greg had previously shared his story in his 2002 biography, Inner City Miracle, long before he became famous. He talked of growing up in the Herman Gardens projects in Detroit, hanging out with Errol Flynn's gang, and the pivotal moment when a court granted him one final chance to turn his life around. He obtained his GED, worked at McDonald's, and then enrolled in law school. In addition to selling more than 500,000 copies, the book helped support youth initiatives in Detroit, providing children with the second opportunity they once required. The foundation of all he subsequently constructed was that book. By 2025, he and his son Amir had established a new rhythm through their podcast, The Mathis Verdict, which dissected high-profile court cases. The federal trial of Sean Diddy Combs was the subject of one of their most explosive events. Greg didn't mince words. He referred to Diddy as a monster and thoroughly examined the RICO allegations, outlining how several offenses may be connected to create a compelling case. Their straightforward, unvarnished style made the show popular with fans who were looking for something more than rumors. They desired the truth as seen by a judge. The world was then reminded that Greg Mathis was still a human. After over 40 years of marriage, Linda filed for divorce in August 2024. The word quickly got around. Greg was broken. They were separated for weeks, and the suffering forced them both to seek therapy. After only 3 weeks apart, they made an appearance together on the Tamron Hall Show in October 2025, announcing their reconciliation. Greg likened the suffering to the death of his mother. According to Linda, treatment helped her learn how to take care of herself once more. They acknowledged their errors while sitting next to each other and holding hands. Greg's candor transformed public anguish into a tale of recovery. By advising men everywhere, don't neglect your wife. Greg didn't run from the truth, though. He described his affair as an unforeseen mistake and publicly acknowledged that it was true. Although Linda acknowledged it on social media, she said that years of separation, not treachery, were the true cause of the deeper pain. Their reconciliation was more audible than the scandal. In order to help young men of single mothers find their way, they rediscovered their faith, joined church mentorship programs, and started a mentorship ministry. By December 2025, they were once more unified, wiser, and traumatized. Greg pledged that there would be no more scandals and started sharing his story to show people that there is hope for forgiveness.